So we are thrilled to be able to introduce some of our superstars in this work that we do, whether it's interreligious relations or, Christian unity, justice work. So we want to just highlight some of those people and just let you get a taste of some of the achievements that they've had as they have done this work. So I hope you will just listen to these, the bios of the people who are about to be introduced to you, and just think about all of the work that went into the accolades that you will hear today. It's always easy in some ways to read the bios, but what bios don't tell you, and what even awards don't tell you, is all the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone behind it, all of the negotiating, all of the patience that has gone into the work that we are highlighting today. So first I want to start with the J. Erwin Miller Award. The J. Erwin Miller Award is given to a layperson who has demonstrated a commitment to church unity, and who, by living out this commitment through action in the world, has been a witness to justice and other values affirmed by our common faith in Jesus Christ. It is named for J. Erwin Miller because he was one of the early and most prominent NCC leaders advancing the goals of the organization. This year, we are just honored and thrilled to be able to award the J. Erwin Miller Award to Dr. Diana Eck. And if you will just hold for one moment, you will hear a little bit more about Dr. Diana Eck from one of our past presidents and favorite people, Ms. Catherine Laurie, who is assistant to the presiding bishop and executive for Ecumenical and Interreligious Relations for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Catherine.
What a personal joy and honor it is to introduce Dr. Diana L. Eck, recipient of this year's J. Erwin Miller Award. Diana is Professor of Comparative Religion and Indian Studies and Frederick Wortham Professor of Law and Psychiatry and Society at Harvard University. She is also the founder and director of the Pluralism Project at Harvard, a premier research effort to study and interpret religious diversity and interfaith relations in the U.S., currently celebrating its 30th anniversary. Diana has been a leader at the intersection of ecumenical and interreligious movements in the U.S. and globally. She was a longtime member and chair of the World Council of Churches Working Group on Dialogue with People of Living Faiths and the NCC's Interfaith Relations Commission. She has encouraged us to apply the Lund Principle to interreligious relations, ensuring that our interfaith efforts are undertaken in ecumenical partnership whenever possible. Her work is foundational to many of the advances we see in ecumenical interreligious relations today, and we rejoice for the renewed partnership with Diana and the Pluralism Project through the NCC's Interreligious Relations Convening Table as we apply their case study initiative to our current efforts. I first met Diana through the pages of her pivotal book, Encountering God, A Spiritual Journey from Bozeman to Benares, published in 1993. In the very first paragraph of the preface, she wrote, "My encounters with people of other faiths have challenged, changed, and deepened my own faith. This simple statement radically shaped the trajectory of my own vocation and my theological self-understanding. I am who I am today because of Diana." And so many of us gathered here to honor her today are bound together by this sentiment. In the closing chapter of Encountering God, Diana asks questions that are prescient for us today. How often does our we come to include people of other faiths, other nations, other races? How often does our we link rather than divide? These are invaluable questions for the we of the ecumenical movement to consider within the we of the oikumene, the whole inhabited earth. So thank you, Diana, for all of the ways in which you have called us to a more engaged we, to an ecumenism that is not conflated with nor separated from the broader, multi-religious, richly diverse world. We honor you for all that you have done to advance a just and peaceful world that strives to be linked, neighbors with neighbors, people with planet, in the encounter of commitments. Thank you, and many, many congratulations.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And without further ado, Dr. Diana Eck, we'd love to hear a few words from you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Leslie, for this wonderful introduction. And I am delighted to be here today to accept this award. I'm delighted to be at this gathering because there is a very deep way in which my own faith has been shaped by the ecumenical movement. I grew up in Montana, a pretty white area of the country, though we had many, many neighbors who were Native. I grew up in a United Methodist church that was, I would say, fairly progressive, hard to say, but I was involved and nourished by the national MYF, the Methodist Student Movement, and by the UCYM, the United Christian Youth Movement. And the issues on the agenda that threw our whole society into turbulence were our issues. They were civil rights and voting rights and immigration justice and the war in Vietnam and the war at home. And we needed a courageous and active church to address those issues. And so it is now, listening to some of the wonderful presentations of this Christian Unity Gathering, the forum last night on racism, the talk this morning by Christine Hong. It is so interesting to see that these issues that so drove my own church, my own experience of church, are here on the agenda, and on the agenda of people who know that we must not be derailed by a church that is dragging behind. The church I knew through the ecumenical movement was one that was involved. I went with the UCYM to the March on Washington and drove all the way through the night from Ohio to Washington and then back the next night. The church I knew was facing the future and wouldn't be derailed by the church that was dragging behind. And you know, we are still there. We can't be derailed by the church dragging behind. We need to call them out, to call out Christian nationalists as Christians against Christian nationalism are doing. And I so look forward to the presentation of those on the panel this afternoon, led by Amanda Tyler of the Baptist Joint Commission. But we need to keep our eye on the future, on the horizon. And for me, that future really involved not only ecumenical work, but the interfaith movement. So who are we in relation to one another? As a young woman who spent an initial year in India and then back again 10, 15 times on research among Hindus and Muslims and Buddhists and Sikhs, that question was always on my mind. Not just who are we as Christians in relation to one another, but who are we as people of faith? And it's not surprising that ecumenical and interfaith relations were often stitched together in our church structures. For years, as Catherine said, I worked with the Interfaith Dialogue Program of the World Council of Churches, and it was a kind of theological education for me. There were a lot of churches in the World Council of Churches I knew very little about, and whose instruction, in a way, was very valuable for me. And then with the National Council of Churches as well. But building up relationships with neighbors of other faiths was and is increasingly urgent. And by the way, listening to the deep dissatisfaction of so many of our participants here with various aspects of the Christian church, with the church as a whole, let me just say that our Hindu and Muslim and Jewish neighbors are also dealing with their yesterday people. They have their own arguments with their own traditions. So we can't just say, oh, Hindus, gosh, they do caste, right? Muslims, they have this jihad and etc. these are the arguments that others are also doing in their particular places. And so we need in the United States to be very serious about the human infrastructure that brings people together across the divides and challenges of today's cities. And part of our work in the Pluralism Project really has been not only to mark and take note of the serious changes in the demographics of America as Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs put down roots in the American landscape, but also to look at the interfaith landscape in cities and towns. And I believe that is really the place where most of our work needs to begin. If you are in a city or in a town that does not have any interfaith connections, look again and do that kind of outreach as well. I'm so glad that this session is being followed by that panel on Christian nationalism, because Christian nationalism not only erodes the foundation of Christianity, but challenges the very foundation of our constitutional democracy. And finally, let me say something about being a laywoman in the United Methodist Church. I often thought about ministry as a young person. It would have been a natural trajectory in a way, but being gay was an obstacle, and I wasn't quite up for taking on that battle as a young person. I often say it was easier to become a tenured professor at Harvard than to have become a minister in my own denomination. But never mind, I saw my own vocation as ministry nonetheless. The ministry of education, the ministry of excavation, the ministry of disruption and questioning, the ministry of blowing things up, and the ministry of bridge building. And I also want to say a word of appreciation for that layperson, J. Erwin Miller, in whose name this award is made. Yes, he had an ecumenical vision, the vision to work together despite differences over the horizon and into the future. He was one of the founders of the NCC, and he chaired its Commission on Race and worked to pass the Civil Rights Act. He also had an aesthetic vision, an appreciation for the simple and beautiful, for the architecture of the beautifully built environment, for new art in public places, for a Chihuly glass chandelier, for sculpture. And his hometown of Columbus, Indiana, became, under his patronage, a place where modern architecture found a home, like his own home, designed by the Finnish architect Saarinen, and other buildings by I.M. Pei and Richard Mayer. His patronage was forward-looking as well, over the horizon and into a new age of the built environment. Now I can say my mother was an activist in politics and in the church in Montana. My father was an architect, mid-century modern architect. And for the future, I want to hold on to what is just and what is beautiful as well. In India, I was thinking about this as Christine Hong spoke this morning and spoke of the greeting, "Have you been fed?" Meaning, are you well deep within? Well, in India, as I trekked toward a multitude of pilgrimage places, the greeting was always, "Have you seen? Have you seen what was there?" And that word darshan, or beholding the beautiful in the divine, in temple after temple and in wayside shrines, is really something I learned very deeply from Hindu neighbors, even though we have very little of image in our own tradition. But I want to hold on to what is just, what can be deeply felt as our nourishment, and to what we see, to what our eyes can behold that is beautiful as well. And I thank you for this opportunity today. I have a special thanks for the opportunity to be even on the screen with Sister Simone Campbell, whom I have admired for many years. So thank you to the NCC. Thank you to this Christian Unity gathering. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Eck. That was wonderful. I appreciate how you walked us through just some of the history that we all should be aware of. And I'm glad you lifted that up, even as we celebrate you.
Thank you.
Now we will turn to one of the biggest architects of good trouble in the DMV, who often gets us into, those of us who work in the Washington Interreligious staff community, always gets us into big trouble. That is Sister Simone Campbell. We will be awarding her the Gwen Guibord Award for Excellence in Interreligious Leadership. This award is given to a person, lay or clergy, who embodies the spirit of interfaith dialogue and peace that NCC works to build in the world. The award is named for Gwen Guibord because of her long-term tenure in NCC's interfaith work. She worked on a commission, a convening table, and with the NCC dialogues. Her establishment of the Guibord Center, one of the preeminent interfaith organizations in the country, and her instrumental assistance in helping the NCC put together the Buddhist and Hindu Christian dialogues is why we have named this award after her. We will have an introduction of Sister Simone by none other than Laura Peralta Schulte, who is the chief lobbyist at Network Lobby. And after we hear from Laura, we will turn to Sister Simone.
It is an honor for me to introduce Sister Simone Campbell as this year's winner of the Gwen Guibord Award for Excellence in Interreligious Leadership. Sister Simone Campbell, or just Simone, as we affectionately call her, is an inspired choice. Simone is a religious leader, an attorney, an author, and a poet with extensive experience in public policy and advocacy. Simone was executive director of Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice from 2004 to just this year. Network was founded by Catholic sisters 50 years ago to educate, organize, and advocate for economic and social transformation in Washington, D.C. Simone might be best known for her willingness to get into what the late John Lewis used to call good trouble when necessary. For example, during the 2010 congressional debate about healthcare reform, when it looked like Catholic members might not vote for the legislation, Simone organized her sisters and wrote a now famous nun's letter supporting the bill. This action was cited by many, including President Obama, as critically important in passing the Affordable Care Act. Around the same time, Simone organized what became the first of 6 cross-country Nuns on the Bus tours. The first tour was in opposition to then Speaker Paul Ryan's budget that would have slashed programs meant to help people in need. Nuns on the Bus received an avalanche of attention across the country from religious communities, elected officials, and the media. Since then, Simone led 5 more Nuns on the Bus tours, all focused on core justice issues. All the while, she helped lead efforts in Washington to expand and maintain important programs for those living in poverty, including spearheading efforts to save the Affordable Care Act in 2017. Simone knows that it takes a community to make justice happen, and so much of her most important work in Washington is rarely discussed. Her leadership at the Washington Interfaith Community Table. Whether it was pulling together planning sessions to craft legislative goals or coordinating discussions on racial justice, Simone was at the forefront of gathering us to work towards shared goals. Simone's commitment stems from what she values, community. She is faithful to the call to be inclusive, to work across faith lines, and to seek justice. So it is with this in mind that I am so very pleased to present this award to my friend and to my former colleague, Sister Simone Campbell. Congratulations, Simone.
I would like to introduce you to Sister Simone Campbell, who is the winner, or the awardee, I should say, because we, I would say, are the winners, but She is the awardee of this year's Gwen Guibord Award for Excellence in Interreligious Leadership. Sister Simone.
Oh, Leslie, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here and to follow Dr. Eck. I'm really touched by that, because I think so much of our work blends that theoretical, the engagement, the thought, the pushing of the edges with the very practical necessity that we advocates in DC need everyone in order to make change. And so I love it when practicality and that inspiring theory of the roots of our faiths bring us together. And I think that's what I've seen in the interfaith community, is a sense of welcome that has been a treasure to me. Now, some of you who know about our Nuns on the Bus event know that it got started because Catholic sisters got in a little trouble with the old Vatican back in Pope Benedict's days. And our friends in DC, our secular colleagues, when I said, what do we do? How do we deal with this? They said, you have to go on the road. We had been advocating against the Ryan budget. You push back against the Ryan budget and you lift up the works of Catholic sisters that depended on a good budget. So that's what we did. Now, okay, as a Christian, I say, and the Holy Spirit made history. It was all a gift of the Spirit, because it really felt like Pentecost. The idea came up in an hour-and-a-half meeting. Whatever gets decided in an hour-and-a-half meeting? We had the money pledged in 10 days. When does that ever happen? I had the route in my head because I knew where Catholic sisters had mother houses, and I knew where the key districts were, so we could stay at the mother houses and lobby. But it's been joy. It's been absolute joy. But then one of the best was when I called Reverend Jim Winkler to say, Jim, could we hold our closing rally on the steps of the Methodist building? And it was when he was in charge of the United Methodist group in DC. And he goes, well, the place might fall down. You know, we were sort of anti-Catholic in the beginning. I said, I know, but things have changed. And he says, yes, they have. And to his credit, we created this amazing thing. We had like 500 people turn up. We had a big rally. We had press. We had all this stuff. But it was because of the Spirit, and because of the Spirit that brought us together in community. And this is the key for advocacy in our world today, is that advocacy is not some rarefied theory of fighting numbers on the, the reconciliation package and how big is it and what's going to get included. What really matters for people of faith is that we tell the stories of real people. And that's why I want to share with you that the last 2 weeks I've spent with Iraqi, we call them our guests, not refugees, call them our guests, at a military base here in Virginia. We have over 4,000 on this base. 43% of the people on the of these guests are under 13. It's the youthful families. But in listening to the stories, what I discovered was it becomes critically important to hear the stories so we know where policy has to go. The number of men who came alone because they couldn't get their families to the airport to get evacuated with them. And one of the glories of this world is that they all have cell phones, or a lot have cell phones, or they share their cell phones around, and they can still connect with their family in Kabul or Kandahar, not so much out in the rural areas, but they can check on it. The heartbreak is to think, what's going to happen? How is this going to work? Are they safe? It's that heartbreak that motivates me to say, we need to stay engaged. And then it's hearing that a family was told, or several families actually, but I only talked to one, were told, I know you have relatives in California, but too many people are asking to go to California. We just can't do it. Pick another place. Well, that was really a good idea, but nobody talked to them about another place. So I sat down with them and explained the map of the US. Do you know Texas is the same size of Afghanistan? They had no way to take in the dimensions. And so as I was talking about what mattered to them, being close to family, not being in a place that's really hot, they just couldn't do that. And it seemed like, well, maybe Oregon could work. It's a day's drive. That might work for you. And I gave them some suggestions that they could Google and look up. But it's that bonding, that relationship, that beginning of connection to understand the new world. My role was as a childcare worker. We would have between 250 and 350 kids in the morning and in the afternoon. It was wild. It was totally wild. It was the most physical job I've had in decades, because it's lifting kids up and hugging and, touching and breaking up fights. And, but we were all working hard to help them learn to adapt to what they're going to do when they go to school. How is this going to work learning English? And one of my very, 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 very favorite stories was the next to the last day that I was there, we were teaching them the red light, green light, yellow light, green light. Well, they all know red means stop, and it's sort of like freeze, and that the yellow light means go slow. So our US folks said, no, it doesn't, it means speed up. But I didn't want to teach them that, And then the green light meant go. So we had these construction paper circles that we were holding up as we were parading around on the field, and the kids had to follow whether it was red or yellow or green and all this. So we learned it. I have no idea what they thought, but we learned a little bit. And then at lunchtime, we were finishing lunch inside, and we were in this old Quonset hut. You have to know it's pretty primitive, World War II Quonset hut. It was our clubhouse. And we'd have 350 kids in there. But anyway, with 4 adults. Anyway, I poked my head out the door, and here's this adorable 5-year-old boy. He had found the red circle for stop. And he's standing on the curb right outside our Quonset hut, holding up the red sign to an big army truck trying to come down the street. And what I realized was, in that very beloved picture that will never leave my brain, is the eagerness to adjust, to belong, to be a part of, the youthfulness of choosing to be in a new place, the wanting to learn and to adapt, the commitment to being made new. And isn't that what the interfaith work is about? Is a commitment to being made new in another way, to a commitment to belong to each other, a commitment to know that the divine flames up in our lives. And as I would say it, the Spirit never leaves us orphan. We always belong to each other. And then the other thing that I learned in the process as an old lady doing childcare is hard work. And that as we're working on the human infrastructure piece, we have got to make sure that we pay childcare workers a living wage, because it's demanding, but it is also the key to creating a future. So isn't that, like Paul says, that we're all part of the body? We're all one body, and it's this intertwined connection. So I'm deeply honored to receive this award. I'm humbled by it. I just have tried to be an instrument of the Spirit in the process. Excuse me. That's as far as I can go. Over to you.
Thank you, Sister Simone. You have been led by the Spirit, and we have all been benefited from it. So thank you so much. And for the work that you're even doing now with our new neighbors from Afghanistan, we appreciate you, and we celebrate you and all of the work that you have done and contributed. We will now introduce the awardee of the President's Award for Excellence in Faithful Leadership. This year's award goes to Reverend Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. The President's Award is for excellence in faithful leadership is given as a way to reward, promote, and encourage faithful, risk-taking leadership among faith leaders, and particularly among younger faith leaders in our midst. I am taking a personal privilege today to introduce someone who is a friend and a mentor who I have known for many years, and who really has just been on the front lines. When you think of good trouble, when you think of advocacy, faith-based advocacy, you think of Reverend Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. There is no other person I know who does this work with the kind of passion and love, who is a bridge builder, who has done so much, whether it's for voting or for other justice issues, than Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. Her bio would say she's a trusted advisor, public policy strategist, faith and community leader, author, lecturer, educator, executive coach, and mentor. She served on the White House Faith Council during the Obama administration. Along with her late husband, Reverend Tom Skinner, she co-founded the highly popular Congressional Black Caucus annual legislative conference, Prayer Breakfast, attracting nearly 3,000 diverse national and local leaders annually, and continues to serve as an advisor for the event. She can be found weekly on a weekly basis on Capitol Hill, where she prays with and for members of Congress from both political parties, following God's mandate to pray for those in authority. I can tell you that she also prays for me, prays for this work that we're doing. We were on the phone together on January 6th, praying down heaven before we knew what would transpire later in the afternoon. I can also tell you about Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, that she is one of the best strategic thinkers from a faith perspective, I think, in our community today. She is called on by everybody from Catholic and evangelical communities to mainline denominations to historically Black denominations. You name it, we call her. She's called by young people. She has put together a master's series for young people to learn about advocacy, and it is par excellence. There is none other like it. And she mentors and grooms young people for the next generation and has been doing this for years. There is just not enough that I can say about Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. She probably wants me to stop right now. She was on a call just today, an emergency call, pull faith leaders together. When she calls, we answer because we know we are doing the work that God has entrusted to us. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to you to celebrate all of the work. I just want to do say this past year in 2020, she organized us for fasting and prayer around the 2020 election. She organized in different states. She got people to the polls. She had poll chaplains, you name it, she does it. And she does it all, I believe, to the glory of God. So with all that said, Reverend Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. I call you Dr. Leslie. You know, I didn't grow up in church. I know that's weird talking to a bunch of Christian type people or people of God. So I escaped when I was I left, when I was about 11 and a half, because I couldn't see the connection between the people like my family who were like dirt poor and the kind of nose in the air business we got in the church. It wasn't a very hospitable environment for poor people, nor was there in the society. So I never connected the love of God to church. I was almost 40, almost when I met my late husband, Tom Skinner, when I accepted the Jesus who was dealing with the kind of people that we were when I grew up. And that was when I got connected to the life of the radical, risk-taking, out-of-the-box thinking Christ, who everybody was worthy of love. I mean, I didn't know we were supposed to be Democrats on one side and Republicans on the other side, left of center Christians on one side. It never occurred to me there was one body at the foot of the cross. So I'm sort of a misfit in all of this. I have friends from people who will never have a Christmas dinner or birthday, who will never be in a barbecue together, who would never even stand on the same street corner together. But that's what Jesus has called us to do. So I don't consider this a radical work. I consider it an obedient work. The work that I do, my passion is young people. I was very disturbed some 15 years ago when I heard people talk about millennials, and how selfish and self-centered and whatever they were. And I said, well, have you spent any time with them? Have you taught them what you know? So when you pass on, and that actually, together with a lot of friends, I do nothing by myself. I have a group of people around me who are just amazing. We started the Master Series for Distinguished Leaders. We now have 200. I call them my children. They are about 25 to 35. They probably would be very successful in the world's terms on their own, but I'm helping them redefine success as making it to the top and taking as many people there as you possibly can. And other than that, you're not successful. The work we do in voting is simply this, that everyone is created in the image of God and have the right and the dignity to be able to vote in free, fair, and safe election. It's as simple as that. I'm perplexed by the low reputation of followers of Jesus today. I'm actually saddened by it, that we have gotten into tribes and into silos where the center of the cross is not the center anymore for us, or the God we all serve, the best of who we all serve, is not the center anymore. But I don't spend a lot of time lamenting. I just go and do the work. And so I'm really grateful for this recognition for my organization. I don't consider it for myself. I have an amazing team here at Skinner Leadership Institute, an amazing group of pastors and people like Leslie, who I can call on in the midnight. And they're I don't know if I'm intimidating or I'm just annoying or I won't stop until I get what I want, but they almost always will say yes. And so I'm grateful to keep doing this work as long as God would give me breath. Thank you so much for this award.
Amen. Amen. Now we know that when you call, that you have prayed and God is asking something of us. So we appreciate you and all the work that you've done, and look forward to continuing to work with you. So Dr. Diana Eck, Sister Simone Campbell, Reverend Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, thank you for all that you have contributed to us in this ecumenical world that we are in, interfaith world, interreligious world, and for all that you will continue to do. We celebrate you. Thank you.